What's up guys, Tommy Bowyer here from Movie Rewind. Welcome to the next instalment of my top 10 scenes series. And today I'm going to be talking about one of my favourite films of all time, Spider-Man 2. Now Spider-Man 2 was released in 2004, it stars Tobey Maguire and was directed by Sam Raimi. And whenever somebody says to me that they don't like comic book films or they don't think comic book films are proper cinema, I will always tell them to watch this film, because this isn't just a fantastic comic book film. It's a brilliant movie in its own right. I love Spider-Man 2. It was one of my favourite films growing up, and as I'm getting older, I just appreciate it more. Sam Raimi did such an amazing job with Spider-Man 2, and I thought it'd be a great idea to count my personal top 10 favourite scenes from this film. Now, obviously, this is my personal opinion, it's not the universal answer, so if you're upset with some of these choices, then bear in mind it's my opinion. And obviously this is going to contain spoilers for Spider-Man 2, so if you have not seen Spider-Man 2, why not? Go and watch it now and then come back and watch this video. And without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first scene has to be the opening credits. Now, the soundtrack to Spider-Man 2 is amazing. One of the best movie soundtracks of all time. And the thing about the opening credits is it gives you the opportunity to listen to the highlights of this soundtrack. And something about opening credits, they just get you pumped and ready. They get you excited for this film. And the Spider-Man 2 credits do a brilliant job at that. Not only do you get to listen to the great soundtrack, but also you get beautiful illustrations as well, which are done really well. When you consider this is just for the opening credits, they could have just had, like the first film, just bog standard animations, but you can tell that time and effort went in to these illustrations, so it's something just very nice to look at on screen. And obviously it recaps the first film, so obviously if you haven't seen the first film in a long while, then this film gives you the opportunity to kind of catch up with what happened in that film. So yeah, the opening credits are fantastic. Definitely a 10 out of 10 scene. Next we have the hospital scene. Now this is Sam Raimi's horror director coming out, because this is actually a very scary scene. When I was little, I really found this scene quite creepy. Now I consider it a really well done scene. It definitely has that horror-esque vibes, which I think is a great thing. But it also demonstrates the power of these tentacles, where they're attacking doctors and nurses. And also it highlights their intelligence as well, because they work together in order to defeat certain doctors who are using equipment against them. And it shows that Doc Ock isn't in control of these tentacles, they have a mind of their own, and if anything, they are controlling him. So this was a fantastic scene. It was a great introduction to the character of Doc Ock, and it's just got horror vibes all over it, which is just amazing. The next scene is the bank heist. Now, I know it's weird, but modern day comic book films never really show a villain just robbing a bank. And you know what? It's great to see. Obviously, it's the first interactions between Spider-Man and Doc Ock, and it's pretty good. It's a decent fight scene in the bank. There's also some great moments moving the story forward as well, because obviously Spider-Man struggles with his powers during this scene, so that kind of foreshadows him losing his powers, and he can't really figure out why. And obviously, halfway through this scene, Aunt May gets kidnapped by Doc Ock, and that adds kind of an extra layer of intensity and stakes to the scene, because obviously Aunt May is now in danger and Spider-Man has to save Aunt May. I also think it's great that Aunt May whacks Doc Ock around the head with her umbrella. It's just such a great moment. And obviously I think this was the scene in which you can, in my opinion, kind of tell Aunt May has an inkling that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, because let's face it, he runs off during this scene and Aunt May never has a go at him about it. So I think that from this scene, Aunt May kind of knows who Spider-Man is. She just chooses not to say anything. So yeah, the bank heist, a really fun and enjoyable action scene. The planetarium party. Now, I mean, Spider-Man 2 is a film which just wants you to know how shit Peter Parker's life is. This is a film which deals with the issue of responsibility, and obviously at the end of the first film, Peter chose to be Spider-Man. He chose to live with great power comes great responsibility. But this scene just shows how hard it is for him to do that, because obviously everything else that he wants to do with his life, he can't do because he is Spider-Man. Obviously in this scene, there's a really great conversation between Peter and MJ. I mean, a lot of people say MJ is unlikable in this film, but actually I think she's quite relatable. When you consider she doesn't know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, it looks like Peter is just messing her around, despite her giving him all the signals that she likes him more than a friend. And obviously then Peter, he just gets dumped on. He has a run-in with Harry Osborn, who of course still blames Peter for his father's death. Well, Harry blames Spider-Man, but as Peter takes photos of Spider-Man for a living, obviously he's not very happy about that. And then of course the obviously the heartbreaking blow is that MJ has agreed to marry John Jameson. And Tobey Maguire's acting in that scene is perfection. You just see this is a man who has just his heart is broken. He has lost everything that he wants because he has to take the responsibility as Spider-Man. So yeah, this scene makes you feel so sympathetic towards Peter Parker. It humanizes Spider-Man in a way that hasn't really been done since, I think. So yeah, this was a fantastic scene which really makes you feel sympathy for Peter Parker. The no more responsibility scene. Now I'm starting this scene from when Peter goes to the doctors, which is actually quite a funny scene, because you don't know if this doctor is like, right, you're Spider-Man then. Which is a funny scene in itself. But what the doctor says to Peter is also very relatable. It's like, well, maybe you're not supposed to be this guy with all this responsibility. Maybe you should just do what you want. And then that leads in to the dream sequence in Uncle Ben's car when he's speaking with Uncle Ben, and that scene is so difficult to watch. Cliff Robertson's only in this film for a couple of minutes, and yet you're heartbroken while watching it, because this is Peter giving up. He's saying he doesn't want to be Spider-Man anymore. He wants to live his own life, and he's letting down his uncle's legacy in many ways. And obviously when he dumps the Spider-Man costume in the bin, I mean, this is why I'm so glad Sam Raimi directed these films, because he's a comic book fan, and a lot of these shots feel like something out of a comic book. So this is the most depressing scene in the film. It really does feel like the end, and at a point it does feel like the film is going to end there. So they did an amazing job of making you really feel like this is the end of Spider-Man and the beginning of Peter Parker. The raindrops sequence. Now, to go from such a depressing and heartbreaking sequence into just joyful excitement is something which Sam Raimi is just so good at. This is a very Sam Raimi type scene. I don't think it would work in many films, but the Raimi trilogy universe, it kind of works. I love this scene because this is just Peter Parker living his best life. You know, he's got no responsibility. He's just your average Joe, not a care in the world, getting on with his life. And it kind of shows that without being Spider-Man, without taking all these responsibilities, without being a role model to everyone else, everything actually goes well. You know, he gets good grades, he meets up with people. It's just a really uplifting scene. There's something, some people would say this scene is cheesy, but I disagree. This isn't a cheesy scene. This is a scene showing how fantastic Peter's life could be if he didn't take up the responsibility of being Spider-Man. So I always loved this scene. It's a joyful scene. And after the really depressing scene that we had before this, I think this was a good idea to kind of change the tone completely and have a more uplifting and happy moment in the film. Aunt May's speech. Now, I said during the bank heist scene that I think Aunt May had an inkling that Spider-Man was Peter Parker, but her speech here is, for me, confirmation that she knows. I mean, it's a beautiful speech which really highlights why people love heroes and why, even though they have to give up some things that they might want to do personally. They become a role model for everyone else. It's a really well-written speech. Rosemary Harris is fantastic during it, and you can really feel the love between Peter and Aunt May during this scene. I mean, this came after Aunt May just kind of left the room because Peter finally revealed that he didn't go to the library on the night of Uncle Ben's death. But this just shows that families, they might fall out, but at the end of the day, honesty really is the best policy, and they will always be there to support you when you need it. So I love this scene. I think it's that scene which finally makes Peter realise that he can't give up being Spider-Man. And also, for me, it's always been confirmation that Aunt May knows Peter is Spider-Man. Even though he doesn't want to tell her openly, she knows that he is Spider-Man. The train battle. Now, you couldn't not have this scene in this ranking, because this is one of the best comic book action scenes I've ever seen brought to cinema. It starts off with the clock face sequence, which is a really well done fight scene in its own right, but then obviously it leads on to the train, and you have everything here. I mean, you have Spider-Man and Doc Ock throwing things at one another, battling on the side of a train. You've got hostages being thrown from the train and Spider-Man having to catch them, and then obviously you have the climax when Doc Ock rips out the brake of the train and Spider-Man has to stop it before it goes off the end of the line. And it is hard to watch the end of this scene because you can feel the intensity to which Spider-Man is trying to prevent this train. And when he's standing there with all of these webs on the walls, just trying to hold it back, screaming, you really feel the intensity. Tobey Maguire did a fantastic job in that scene. Plus, I love the touching scene after it when, some of the passengers realise this guy he's just a kid. We all think Spider-Man is this untouchable superhero, but actually he's just a regular guy. He's just a kid with all of this responsibility. And I love that they all say, we're not going to tell anybody. No one's taking photos of him with his mask off and spreading it online. Obviously in 2004 that was a lot harder to do, but I love how everyone's just so thankful about him saving their lives. So yeah, I really like this scene. It's a very intense, action-packed and exciting scene. I'm on my edge of my seat throughout, even though I've seen this film countless times. It's just a fantastic action scene. The final confrontation between Spider-Man and Doc Ock. Now, this isn't exactly, I suppose, as intense as the train action scene, because there's not actually that much fighting. I mean, Spider-Man and Doc Ock do fight during this scene, but for me, it's what happens after that fight. It's how Spider-Man unmasking himself as Peter Parker and then reasoning with Doc Ock, showing him, using his own words, that actually intelligence is a gift, you need to use it for the good of mankind, and how his tentacles have corrupted him. Plus, this is how you do a villain redemption arc. Doc Ock was never really a villain in the conventional sense. He was being manipulated by his tentacles, who, in many ways, his tentacles were just doing what they were made for. They were made to conduct this experiment, so they've just decided they're going to do that by any means necessary. Doc Ock's death is well deserved. Even though he helped cause this problem, he redeems himself by sacrificing his life to prevent this sun from literally destroying New York City. So I've always loved Doc Ock's death. I think it's a perfect example of how to do a villain redemption story and do it well. Plus, I love that scene when Peter turns round without his mask on and MJ sees him, and just that gasp she gives. It's almost like a sigh of relief, because no one needs to say anything. Peter no longer has to explain himself. He doesn't have to put any excuses her way. She now completely understands why Peter has been giving her the brush off for the entire film. So it's one of those scenes without words. You completely understand what each character is thinking, and that's just a testament to the actors involved. Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, they were phenomenal during this scene. And then we have the ending. Now, this ending really does feel like a happy ever after. And I think it wouldn't work if we hadn't seen Peter be treated like shit throughout this film. I mean, this entire film is about Peter having to deal with the responsibility of being Spider-Man and feeling like he has to do it on his own and give up everything that he actually wants to do, like have a good education and be with MJ. And that's why this happy ever after is so deserved. The scene in which Peter and MJ finally get together, with MJ having left her wedding to be with Peter, is a really sweet moment. It's just like you've spent 2 films getting to this moment, and finally Peter has what he wants. And then obviously we have the final swing, which of course I love the final swing. They do an even better final swing in this film compared to the first film, which would have been pretty hard to beat, but they did pull it off. This is just a very uplifting ending, and obviously you do have that final look MJ gives to the camera as if to say, so this is what it's going to be like. I'm going to be on my own for a lot of the time. So it kind of teases that this relationship is going to have its problems, even though in the heat of the moment, obviously, they're just both so pleased to be together. Now, I love the ending to this film. Obviously, the end credits, you have Vindicated, which I think is a great song to use because obviously this is Peter Parker's story. Everything he has been through during this film, how lonely he got, how depressed he got, he's at the other end and he finally has something to be happy about. So this film, it just has such a perfect and uplifting ending, which just makes you feel good inside. Now, Spider-Man 2, as I said in the beginning, is a phenomenal film. I love everything about it. This may be called Spider-Man 2, but this is Peter Parker's story. This is Peter Parker really dealing with great power comes great responsibility. He tries to do what's right and seems to be losing everything else that he loves and holds dear, so eventually gives up. But then slowly but surely he realises that people need Spider-Man. People need that hero to look up to and inspire them. And then by the end of this film, when he finally gets MJ, when he gets what he's wanted for so long, it feels deserved. You can completely feel so much sympathy for Peter throughout this film. And then for him finally to get what he wants is just, it makes you feel great inside. This film has a fantastic villain in the form of Doc Ock, one of those villains which you can feel so much sympathy for, and when he is redeemed by the end of the film, you're glad that he dies a hero instead of living to just become a villain. All of the actors do an amazing job in this film, and obviously there are more than 10 scenes in this film, which I love. To be honest, I struggle to find a scene in this film which I do not enjoy, but that was my personal top 10 scenes. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe in order to receive great and maybe even improved quality content in the future. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in another one. See ya!